The knock came before sunrise, sharp and unfamiliar, echoing through a house that suddenly felt smaller. When I opened the door, it wasn't my husband standing there. It was a man in a dark jacket holding a clipboard, already looking past me. I had been married 7 years, long enough to believe a home could protect you from outside decisions. We lived in my mother-in-law's old house, quiet and well-kept, with winter light always lingering in the hallways. That morning, the air smelled like cold metal and dust, and something unspoken shifted before anyone said my name out loud. The house was awake before I was. Not alive, just listening. The clock on the stove glowed 5:41, a soft green that never quite dimmed. Somewhere in the walls, the refrigerator hummed its low, steady note, like it had been doing all night without complaint. The kind of sound you don't notice until everything else goes quiet. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling. The paint above the bed had a hairline crack that ran toward the window, a thin white vein I'd traced with my eyes 1,000 times. Outside, the sky was still holding on to the dark. Dawn hadn't decided to arrive yet. My husband's side of the bed was empty. The sheet there was smooth, tucked in too neatly to have been left that way by sleep. His pillow was untouched, cool when I reached for it, as if he'd never been there at all. No dent. No warmth. Just absence arranged. I didn't feel panic. Not yet. I listened instead. The house had its own language in the early hours. The soft tick of cooling pipes, the faint creak of wood adjusting to the cold. Frost had laced the window panes in delicate patterns, like small ferns pressed against the glass. Winter had come quietly this year, settling in without asking. I swung my feet onto the floor. The boards were cold, even through my socks. They creaked once under my weight, a familiar sound, almost affectionate. The floor knew me. It always had. In the hallway, the light was still off. I didn't turn it on. I didn't want to disturb whatever fragile balance was holding the morning together. I padded toward the kitchen, my steps careful, as if noise itself might invite something I wasn't ready to meet. The kettle sat on the stove where I'd left it the night before. Empty. Waiting. I reached for it out of habit, then stopped. There was a feeling in my chest, not sharp, not heavy, just unsettled. Like standing on a dock when the water underneath has started to move. That was when the knock came. It wasn't loud. It wasn't hurried. Just 3 precise taps against the front door. The sound moved through the house differently than anything else. It didn't echo. It didn't bounce. It landed. Solid. Certain. As if whoever stood on the other side already knew I would answer. I froze, my hand still hovering near the kettle handle. No one knocked that way unless they meant to be taken seriously. I glanced toward the hallway again, toward the bedroom door. Still closed. Still quiet. My husband didn't stir. Didn't call my name. The silence behind me felt intentional now, arranged the same way his side of the bed had been. The knock came again. Same rhythm. Same restraint. I walked to the door slowly, each step measured. The hallway runner muffled my feet, the fabric worn thin in places where we'd passed each other 1,000 times without thinking. On the wall, our wedding photo hung slightly crooked. I noticed that too. The frame leaned just enough to suggest it had been touched recently. I stopped inches from the door. For a moment, I rested my palm against the wood. It was colder than I expected. Solid. Unyielding. A boundary. Something inside me shifted then, not fear exactly, but recognition. A quiet understanding that whatever waited on the other side wasn't there by mistake. This wasn't confusion or coincidence. This was a decision arriving. I opened the door. The man standing there wasn't someone I knew. He wore a dark jacket, neat but unremarkable, and held a clipboard against his chest like a shield. His shoes were polished, untouched by the frost that coated our steps. Behind him, another man stood a half step back, eyes already scanning the interior of the house. Neither of them smiled. "Good morning," the first man said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Ma'am." The word landed oddly. Too formal for this hour. Too distant. "Yes," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "We're here on behalf of the property owner," he continued, glancing down at his clipboard, then back up at me. "Just to ensure a smooth transition this morning." Transition. I waited for him to explain, for the sentence to find its end. It didn't. He simply stood there, patient, like time was on his side. I felt the house behind me then, the walls, the furniture, the quiet warmth that had always meant safety. I realized, all at once, that the silence wasn't neutral. It wasn't empty. It was aligned. "Is my husband here?" I asked. The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway, then returned to mine. We've already spoken with him. Of course you have, I thought. Of course this started before I woke up. From somewhere deep in the house, I heard a floorboard creak. A door opening softly. Footsteps stopping short of the living room. He was there now. Close enough to hear. Far enough not to intervene. I didn't turn around. The man with the clipboard waited, pen poised, ready for something. My name, my compliance, my consent. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten, the faintest wash of gray-blue creeping in at the edges. Morning was arriving whether I wanted it or not. I stepped back, opening the door wider. As they crossed the threshold, polite and measured, I understood something without anyone saying it aloud. The house had already chosen its side. And it wasn't mine. The first thing I noticed was how careful they were with their shoes. One stepped inside, then paused, wiping the soles against the mat even though there wasn't any snow on them. The other followed slower, holding the door open just long enough to let the cold trail in behind him. It lingered at my ankles like it was curious. They didn't rush, they didn't hesitate. They stood in my living room the way people do when they've practiced where to place their feet. The taller one nodded at me once, polite and distant. The clipboard stayed tucked against his chest, angled slightly away, like it held something private. The other man's eyes moved around the room. Not rude, not invasive, just collecting details. The couch. The framed photos. The hallway. I want to reassure you, the first one said gently. We're just here to assist. Assist. The word felt unfinished, like it needed something after it. I waited for him to add more. He didn't. The room filled the space instead. The low hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock over the doorway. The clock had always run a minute fast. I'd meant to fix it. Assist with what? I asked. He glanced at his clipboard, then back at me. His mouth tightened just slightly, as if he were choosing from a list of approved responses. To ensure things remain calm. The other man shifted his weight. The floor creaked beneath him, a familiar sound, but it didn't feel friendly now. It felt like the house was registering witnesses. I folded my arms, more to keep my hands still than anything else. Who sent you? There it was. The question I'd been circling since the knock. Neither man answered right away. They exchanged a look, not surprise, not discomfort, just confirmation. The taller one nodded once, as if to himself. Your mother-in-law, he said. Her name didn't arrive loudly. It didn't demand attention. It settled into the room like dust, coating everything evenly. No one apologized for it. No one claimed responsibility. It was simply stated, like the weather. I let the word hang there. Of course it was her. Of course this came from a place that had never needed my agreement. I looked past them, down the hallway toward the bedroom. The door was still closed. Too closed. No sound from inside. No movement. He knows you're here? I asked. Yes, the man replied. We spoke earlier. Earlier. That word landed heavier than her name. My husband had always been an early riser. Up before the light, moving quietly, careful not to wake me. I used to think it was kindness. Now I wondered how many mornings he'd already been awake without me. I'd like to speak to him, I said. The taller man nodded again. Of course. He didn't move. Neither of them did. The pause stretched. I waited for footsteps. For the bedroom door to open. For his voice, sleepy, confused, apologetic. Something human. Nothing happened. The silence behind me grew deliberate. It pressed against my back like a closed door. I'm sure this is a misunderstanding, I said, though I no longer believed it. He wouldn't. The other man cleared his throat softly, not interrupting, just reminding me he was there. His eyes dropped briefly to the floor, then lifted again, scanning the room like it was already being catalogued. Ma'am, the first man said, his voice still calm. Our role here is not to take sides. I almost laughed. Not taking sides required standing somewhere. And they were standing here, in my living room, between me and the rest of my life. I walked a few steps toward the hallway. The guards didn't stop me, but I felt them track my movement, quiet and precise. Halfway down, I paused. Honey, I called. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. It echoed once, then disappeared. From behind the bedroom door came a faint sound, fabric shifting, maybe. A breath. Proof of life. He's here, I said, turning back toward them. Yes, the man replied. Then why isn't he coming out? This time the answer took longer. We were told, he said carefully, that direct communication might escalate things. Escalate. I stared at him, trying to understand how my presence in my own home had become a risk factor. My reflection stared back at me from the hallway mirror. Hair undone, face pale, eyes searching for something solid to hold on to. "I just want him to look at me," I said quietly. Just that. The guards didn't respond. They didn't need to. The message had already been delivered without words. Behind me, the bedroom door opened a crack. I didn't turn. I knew if I did, I'd give him something, anger pleading permission. I wasn't ready to decide which. The floor creaked again. A single step. Then nothing. He was standing there. I could feel it. Close enough to hear. Far enough not to choose me out loud. I closed my eyes for a moment. The house smelled like coffee grounds and cold air. Morning was moving forward, indifferent to us all. The clock ticked on, still a minute fast. When I opened my eyes, the guards were watching me, not unkindly, not sympathetically. Just present. I understood then. This wasn't about security, it wasn't about peace. It was about authority, and who had been granted it when I wasn't looking. I turned away from the hallway and faced them again. "Tell me what happens next." The taller man finally lowered his clipboard. "We'll give you some time," he said. "Then we'll proceed." Proceed. The word echoed in my chest. Behind me, the bedroom door closed softly. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a click. And in that sound, I learned exactly where my husband was, and why he wasn't coming to save me. He didn't come into the living room. I knew he was there because the hallway changed. The air shifted the way it does when someone steps into a space without announcing themselves. The guard straightened just slightly. Not attention, recognition. I stood near the arm of the couch, my hand resting on the worn fabric like it might steady me. The house felt paused, holding its breath. Outside, a car passed somewhere down the street, tires hissing softly over damp pavement. Morning traffic beginning its quiet march, unaware of us. My husband cleared his throat. "I'm here," he said. Not to me. To the room. He stayed in the hallway, just out of sight. Fully dressed. Shoes on. Coat already buttoned. He hadn't slept in his clothes, that much was clear. This had been prepared. Laid out carefully, the way he laid out his shirts the night before a big meeting. I waited for him to step forward. He didn't. "This doesn't have to be a big thing," he continued. His voice was calm, measured, like he was walking across ice he'd already tested. "It's just temporary." Temporary was a word he used when he wanted something to sound smaller than it was. Temporary silence. Temporary distance. Temporary discomfort. I turned slightly so I could see him. He stood with one hand braced against the wall, eyes fixed somewhere just past my shoulder. Not at me. Never at me. Temporary for who? I asked. He swallowed. I saw his jaw tighten, release. For everyone. Mom just wants peace. Things have gone too far. Too far. The phrase echoed hollow, like it had been rehearsed in a different voice. I thought of all the moments that had led us here. Conversations I hadn't been invited to. Pauses when I entered a room. The way his phone had started staying face down on the table. "How long have you been talking about this?" I asked quietly. He shifted his weight. The floor creaked beneath him. One familiar complaint from the house, like it remembered how often he'd stood there before, undecided. "It's not like that," he said. "You're making it sound." "I'm asking a question," I said. The guards remained still, eyes lowered, like they were trying not to overhear. But this was already witnessed. Nothing about it was private anymore. He exhaled slowly. A while. There it was. Not a date. Not a number. Just confirmation. A while meant weeks. Maybe months. Long enough for plans to feel normal. Long enough for my absence to be factored in. I felt something loosen in my chest then, not relief, not anger. Just clarity. "That's why you were up early," I said. "That's why the bed was empty." He didn't answer. "Did you agree to this?" I asked. "To them being here?" He nodded once. "Barely." "Yes," he said. The word landed heavier than anything else he'd said that morning. I looked at him properly then. The man I'd married. The man who used to bring me coffee on Sundays, who knew how I liked my toast. His face looked the same. His eyes didn't. "Can you look at me?" I asked. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. One last opening. He tried. I could see the effort in the way his shoulders shifted, the way his chin lifted just slightly. But his eyes didn't make it. They dropped to the floor between us, tracing the pattern in the rug like it held instructions. "I can't do this right now," he said softly. That was when I knew. Not that he was choosing his mother. Not even that he was choosing himself. He was choosing not to choose at all. Silence had become his position. I never agreed to any of this, I said. My voice surprised me. Steady. Clear. You decided for me. He flinched. A small reaction. The kind people have when a truth brushes too close. She's worried about you, he said quickly. About us. She thinks space will help. She. I repeated. He caught himself too late. The room felt smaller then. Not because of the guards. Not because of the walls. But because the language had shifted. I was no longer part of the conversation. I was the subject of it. I took a step toward him. He stepped back. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fast. Just a quiet adjustment of distance. That hurt more than anything else. I needed you to stand with me, I said. Just stand. He nodded, eyes still down. I know. But he didn't move. Behind him, the bedroom door stood open now. The space where we slept, where we talked in the dark, where decisions used to be whispered between us. It felt exposed, like a secret left out in the cold. The taller guard cleared his throat gently. Not to interrupt, just to mark time. We can give you a few more minutes, he said. My husband didn't look at him. Didn't look at me. I realized then that whatever choice he'd made hadn't happened today. Today was just the execution. The final step in something that had already settled into him. How long? I asked, my voice barely above the hum of the refrigerator. Did you know you weren't going to stop this? He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they still didn't meet mine. I thought it would be easier this way, he said. Easier. I nodded once. The house creaked softly, like it was adjusting to a new arrangement of weight. I stepped back toward the living room, toward the couch, toward the life that was already loosening its grip on me. The guards waited, respectful and unmoving. My husband stayed where he was. As I passed the hallway mirror, I caught my reflection, still pale awake. I didn't look like someone being removed. I looked like someone being replaced. Behind me, he said my name. Just once. Quiet. I didn't turn around. Because by then, I understood the answer to the question that had been forming all morning. He hadn't chosen today. He had chosen long before the door ever opened. The guards didn't rush me. They stood near the door, hands folded, eyes lowered, like they were waiting for a train that was already late. One of them glanced at his watch, then away, as if time itself were impolite to mention. Take what you need, he said quietly. Not your things, just what you need. I walked back into the living room, my steps slow, deliberate. The house felt different now, not hostile, just unfamiliar. Like a place that had learned my name once, and then decided to forget it. The couch sat where it always had. The lamp beside it still leaned slightly to the left, its shade warped from years of heat. I reached out and touched the back of the chair, my fingers resting on the worn fabric. The indentation from where I used to sit was still there, faint but loyal. Proof. The coffee table held a folded magazine, open to a page I'd marked with a corner crease. I smoothed it flat without thinking, the way you do when you're trying to leave things better than you found them. The way you do when you don't know if you'll be back. The house was quiet, but not empty. It was filled with echoes, footsteps from other mornings, laughter from rooms that now refused to remember it. I went to the kitchen. The counter was cold under my palm. I rested my hand there longer than necessary, feeling the chill move into my skin. I'd leaned against this counter through countless evenings, listening to stories that never included endings like this. The refrigerator hummed steadily, loyal to its one job. On the door, a small magnet held a note I'd written weeks ago. A grocery list. Milk. Bread. Apples. I took the note down and folded it once, then again, sliding it into my coat pocket. It wasn't important, but it was mine. Behind me, I could feel the guards' presence without seeing them. They stayed where they were, careful not to crowd, careful not to comfort. That felt intentional. I moved down the hallway, touching the doorframe as I passed. The wood was smooth from years of contact, hands brushing by, shoulders leaning in moments of pause. The frame held the memory of us, even if the house didn't want it anymore. The bedroom door stood open. Inside, the bed was neatly made. Too neatly. The pillows were stacked, aligned with a precision I didn't recognize. My side of the nightstand was bare. The lamp unplugged. The drawer half open, empty. He'd already sorted what belonged to me. I knelt and opened my suitcase, the wheels squeaking softly in protest. I folded clothes slowly, one piece at a time. Not because I was careful, but because speed felt disrespectful. To myself. to the life I'd built here without permission to dismantle it properly. From the doorway, one of the guards cleared his throat gently. "We'll be right here," he said. I nodded without looking up. As I stood, I caught sight of the mirror above the dresser. My reflection looked thinner somehow. Not physically. Like something essential had stepped out ahead of me and forgotten to wait. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A message. I didn't check it. Some things didn't deserve to be read yet. I passed the guest room next. The door was closed. I paused there, my hand hovering just above the knob. I thought of all the times my mother-in-law had stayed here, her voice filling the house, her presence rearranging the air. She wasn't here now, but she didn't need to be. Her absence felt planned, strategic, like the kind of absence that still directs everything from a distance. Downstairs again, the morning light had finally begun to seep through the windows. Pale and thin, it cut across the floor in narrow bands, highlighting dust I'd never noticed before. The light didn't warm the room. It just revealed it. The guard stepped aside as I moved toward the door. "Is there anything else you need?" one asked. I looked around one last time. At the framed photos on the wall. At the plant by the window I'd kept alive longer than anyone expected. At the small crack in the ceiling I'd traced with my eyes that morning, not knowing it was the last time. "No," I said. That wasn't true. But it was all I could carry. As I reached for the doorframe, I stopped. My fingers rested there, pressing lightly, memorizing the texture. The small nick near the bottom where we'd moved furniture once and laughed about it. "I was here," I whispered. The house didn't respond. Outside, the air was colder than I expected. The sky had fully turned now, soft gray-blue, indifferent and wide. A bird called from somewhere nearby, its sound sharp against the quiet. I stepped onto the porch. Behind me, the door closed gently. No slam. No finality. Just a careful click, like someone didn't want to draw attention to what had just ended. The guards remained on the threshold. One held the door. The other waited, clipboard tucked against his chest, ready to check something off. I walked down the steps slowly, my suitcase bumping softly behind me. Each step felt heavier than the last, like gravity was reconsidering its rules. At the bottom, I stopped. I turned back once, not to look at the house, but to look at the doorway. At the space where I had stood so many times before, believing it would always open for me. I understood then. I wasn't being removed from a house. I was being erased from a marriage, quietly, cleanly, without witnesses who would remember me. I didn't shout, that I didn't argue, that I didn't ask anyone to explain. I just stood there, breathing in the cold, letting the morning take me as I was. And as I walked away, I wondered, not for the first time, what it means to leave without raising your voice, and whether silence, once chosen, can ever be undone. The days after felt quieter than they should have. Not peaceful, just muted. Like the world had turned the volume down without asking. I woke in a borrowed room with thin curtains and unfamiliar light, the kind that slips in sideways and doesn't bother to warm anything. The clock on the nightstand ticked too loudly. I reached for my phone before I was fully awake, not expecting a message, but still checking. There was nothing. No missed calls. No apology shaped like concern. Just the blank screen reflecting my face back at me. I made coffee in a kitchen that wasn't mine. The mug didn't fit my hand the way my old one did. It felt heavier, or maybe that was just me. I stood by the window and watched steam lift, curl, disappear. The morning went on as if nothing had been interrupted. That was the strangest part. The world didn't pause to mark what I'd lost. I spent those first days moving slowly, like my body had learned a new gravity. I folded clothes I hadn't chosen. I placed my suitcase in a corner where it wouldn't be in the way. I learned the sound of someone else's refrigerator, the rhythm of someone else's house. At night, I listened for footsteps that weren't coming. My phone finally buzzed on the third day. His name appeared without ceremony. "Can you send me a list of what you took? Just for records." Records. I stared at the message longer than I needed to. Then I typed back exactly what he asked for. Shirts. Books. A coat. Nothing sentimental. Nothing that would invite a response. He replied with a thumbs up. That was it. No question about where I was sleeping. No, are you okay? No acknowledgement of the space I'd been removed from. Just logistics, wrapped neatly in efficiency. It became clear then, painfully, calmly, that he hadn't chosen against me in anger. There had been no shouting match behind closed doors, no dramatic line drawn in the sand. He hadn't slammed a door or raised his voice. He'd chosen comfort. The comfort of familiar routines, the comfort of someone else deciding things for him. The comfort of silence that didn't ask him to explain himself. I realized the guards hadn't been the shock. They were just the visible part. The uniforms. The clipboards. The careful language. The real decision had already been made in quieter rooms, in conversations I'd never heard. It had settled into him the way habits do, slowly, invisibly, until they feel inevitable. I walked in the afternoons, letting the cold air clear my thoughts. The neighborhood was lined with bare trees, their branches thin and honest against the sky. I watched people carry groceries, walk dogs, argue softly near parked cars. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. I was learning to stand without permission. One afternoon, I found myself outside a small thrift store. The bell above the door chimed when I stepped in, bright and hopeful. I ran my fingers along racks of coats, touching fabrics I didn't recognize. I wasn't shopping. I was reminding myself that I could choose something and take it home without asking anyone first. At night, the questions came. Not loud ones. Small ones that waited until the lights were off. Had there been a moment I could have changed this? Had I mistaken quiet for peace? How long had he been living a version of his life where I wasn't centered? The answers arrived without words. In the way he never called unless he needed something documented. In the way my absence didn't disrupt his schedule. In the way silence seemed to suit him. Weeks passed. The dust settled. I started waking earlier, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I found a routine that belonged to me: coffee, walking, writing lists that didn't have to be shared. I learned the pleasure of closing a door behind me and knowing no one would open it without my consent. One evening, I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to the rain tap against the window. The sound was steady, unhurried. I thought of the morning the guards stood at the door, of how still everything had been. I understood something then. Some choices are loud. They announce themselves with raised voices and broken objects, and witnesses who nod afterward and say, "I saw it coming." Others are finalized in whispers. They don't need a scene. They don't need an explanation. They just need one person willing to stay quiet. I never received an apology. I never received a confession. And somehow, that told me more than either could have. I began to imagine a future not shaped by avoidance. One where decisions were spoken aloud. Where silence wasn't used as shelter. It wasn't fully formed yet, just an outline, faint but steady. The night air cooled. The rain slowed. I turned off the lamp and lay back, hands folded on my chest. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to rest. Not relief. Not happiness. Space. The kind that allows a person to breathe without checking who's listening. I thought about the question that had followed me since the morning I left. Who are you when no one is guarding the door anymore? The answer didn't arrive all at once. But in that quiet room, with nothing between me and the night, I knew this much. I was no longer waiting to be let back in. And whatever came next would be something I chose. Out loud, with the door open, and no one standing between me and myself.